He had everything handed to him: private jets, designer clothes, and a last name that opened doors before he even knocked. But inside, he was crumbling, failing every test, drowning in silence. Everyone had given up on him, his teachers, his classmates, even his father, until one day, in the quietest corner of the school, a janitor, a Muslim woman nobody ever really looked at, said something that hit him harder than any lesson ever had. He thought she was just cleaning floors. He had no idea she was about to clean out everything he thought he knew. His name was Mark Hale, the only son of Richard Hale, a tech tycoon whose name graced the cover of Forbes as regularly as the seasons changed. Mark grew up surrounded by private jets, personal chefs, and birthday parties with celebrities as guests. But for all he had, one thing was missing: purpose. At 17, Mark attended one of the most elite private high schools in Boston. Not because he'd earned his way in, but because the name Hale worked like a golden key. No tests, no interviews, just a wire transfer and a reputation that did the talking. Inside those marble hallways lined with portraits of powerful alumni, Mark was known for three things: his arrogance, his expensive clothes, and his academic failure. His grades were a joke. Teachers passed him out of fear, not merit. And he didn't care. Why would he? One day, he'd inherit an empire. What could a GPA do that his last name couldn't? He mocked teachers, ignored classmates, and smirked through lectures like they were beneath him. When the school counselor once called him in about his failing grades, Mark leaned back in his chair and said, "I could buy this school if I wanted to. What grade is going to change that?" The quote spread like wildfire, but no one dared confront him. Everyone, from faculty to students, tiptoed around Mark. No one wanted to risk losing the Hale family's donations. At home, things weren't much better. His father, Richard, was a man of stone, cold, calculated, a self-made billionaire who didn't believe in excuses, not even from his own son. "You're an embarrassment," Richard said one night after another call from the school. "If you worked for me, you'd be fired." Mark crossed his arms, rolling his eyes. "But I'm not your employee. I'm your son." "The world doesn't care," Richard shot back. "Either you become someone, or you'll just be another spoiled heir with no spine. And I won't carry you." The silence that followed hit like a punch. Richard wasn't bluffing. He was dead serious. The next day, Mark showed up at school like nothing had happened. He pulled into the faculty parking lot in his sleek Audi, a gift from his last birthday, and walked the halls like they were his personal runway. Some students stared in envy, others in disgust. But one pair of eyes didn't look away. Hers, an older Muslim woman, likely in her 50s, was mopping the floor near the side entrance. Her posture was upright, her gaze steady. A plain scarf covered her hair, tucked neatly under her work cap. Her uniform was a little wrinkled, but her presence wasn't. Mark didn't notice her. To him, she was invisible, just the janitor. Background noise. But school began to weigh on him. More tests. More failing grades. And then came the blow. His dad cut off his credit cards, took the car, and forced him to take the school bus like everybody else. One of those bitter mornings, he passed the janitor in the hallway. For the first time, he noticed she was whispering something while cleaning. "The only true wisdom," she said softly, "is in knowing you know nothing." Mark stopped. "What did you just say?" She looked up, calm and unafraid. "Nothing you're ready to understand yet, boy." He gave a short, sarcastic laugh, but something in her words stung. She turned and walked away like nothing had happened. But Mark kept thinking about her. Before we proceed further, I want to take a moment to invite you to be part of something bigger than just this story. If what you've heard so far has made you feel, think, or reflect, even for a moment, then hit that like button so more people can discover voices like these. Subscribe to Muslim Stories Unheard so you never miss the next untold truth waiting to be heard. And if you've lived through moments of bias, resilience, faith, or triumph, or even witnessed them, share your experience in the comments. Let's get back to our story. He climbed the steps of the school building with his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. Everything felt different, colder, smaller. Gone was the smug energy he used to carry through the hallways. Now he walked fast, quiet, trying not to feel the weight of the stairs. That morning, he got his literature test back, a plain white envelope folded in half with a kind of cold finality to it. He opened it, expecting a mercy grade. Maybe a low C. Grade, 18 out of 100. Scrawled at the bottom. Did you even read the passage? Mark stared at the page, blinked, and laughed nervously. Looked around. No one was laughing with him. More tests came that week. Math, 24%. History, 31%. Biology, a solid 0. It wasn't funny anymore. The school counselor called him in again. This time, her voice wasn't gentle. Mark, you're academically at risk. I'm not talking about behavior. I mean failure. Statistically, you're at the bottom of the entire senior class. It's temporary, he shrugged. I'll hire a tutor. You already had 3. They all quit. That shut him up. Later that day, as he left her office, Mark slipped out through the back entrance to avoid being seen. And there she was again, the janitor, scrubbing up a soda spill near the cafeteria. She saw him and gave a polite nod. He stopped. You said something last time about Socrates. She straightened slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. And you remember it? Yeah. I mean, it stuck with me. Kind of weird for a janitor to be quoting ancient philosophers. She crossed her arms. It's weirder when a boy with the whole world at his feet can't pass a reading test. He bit his cheek. That one landed hard. You used to be a teacher, didn't you? He asked. Not just philosophy, she said evenly. I taught plenty more before life, threw me off balance. Teach me then, he said, the arrogance in his voice gone. Help me. Please. She studied him for a moment. One condition, you leave your name and your pride at the door. Start from 0, from the floor. Fine, he whispered. I can't keep failing. She handed him a worn spiral notebook. You come early, before class. We meet here. And every evening after school, you write what you've learned. Not facts, truth. What if I get it all wrong? Then you'll finally be getting it right. The next morning, Mark showed up before sunrise. The school was still asleep, wrapped in fog and silence. He walked slowly through the back entrance, gripping the notebook like it was something sacred. He found her Samira, in the east wing, polishing the floor with slow, deliberate circles. Her headscarf was neatly pinned beneath her cap, a few silver strands of hair visible at her temples. She wore simple earbuds and hummed something soft under her breath. Maybe a Quranic recitation, maybe just an old lullaby from her childhood. Mark stood awkwardly for a moment before stepping forward. Hey, you said you'd teach me. Remember? Samira paused, removed one earbud, and looked at him calmly. I remember. I also said it wouldn't be easy. I don't care. I need this. Then let's begin. But first, you should know my name. Samira Khan. Mark gave a faint smile. How long have you been working here? 3 years. Before that, other schools. And before that, she hesitated, then looked him square in the eyes. I was a college professor. English literature and philosophy. His eyes widened. Why would you leave that for this? Samira folded her cleaning cloth slowly, answering without an ounce of shame. Sometimes life takes everything you thought was yours and leaves you with nothing but what you know. And I still know how to teach. Mark nodded, overwhelmed. For the first time in his life, he saw someone truly strong without needing wealth or influence. So where do we start? I tried reading some stuff last night. I don't even know how to begin. That's the first truth, she said. Pride fools you into thinking you already know. But when you admit you don't, that's when you start learning for real. I can read, Mark muttered defensively. I didn't say you couldn't. But I'm not talking about reading words. I'm talking about understanding what's between the lines. She reached into her bag and pulled out a battered notebook, its edges frayed and pages filled with tight, looping handwriting. Every morning before class, you meet me here. 1 hour. And every evening, after I finish cleaning, you sit and write. What you learned, what you felt, what you understood. No grades. Just honesty. Mark opened the notebook. Blank pages, an invitation, a challenge. What if I fail again? Then you're finally doing it right. The days rolled by. A strange rhythm began to form, almost sacred. Mark showed up early. Samira greeted him without ceremony, only questions. What did that sentence make you feel? Why do you think this character stayed silent? Can you tell me what courage sounds like? She didn't lecture. She provoked. Mark began to see differently. The book stopped feeling like a chore. The sentences started pulling at his gut. He was learning to feel what words were trying to say. The notebook filled up, not with answers, but with thoughts, reflections, fears. He wrote about his father, about pressure, about how angry he was at being empty all the time. Samira read every word. One evening, while he was writing in the cafeteria, two boys walked by laughing loudly. One of them, Kyle, a star football player, nudged the other and smirked. "Look at little Hale now," Kyle said, writing love letters to the hijabi janitor. The jab stung. Mark clenched his jaw, ready to snap back. But Samira, who had just stepped in to collect trash from a nearby table, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and whispered, "You don't measure depth with a shallow ruler." He looked up at her. That one line cut deeper than any insult. Later that night, Mark opened a message from his father. "They updated your academic record. One last warning. Turn things around or you're out. No trust fund, no apartment, nothing." Mark stared at the message. He didn't reply. But for the first time, he didn't feel afraid. He felt ready. Friday arrived with its own buzz and tension. The school was alive with end-of-term energy, report cards, college counselor meetings, graduation prep. Everyone was talking about the future. Mark walked through the crowd, gripping a folder full of redone assignments, essays marked with praise, and a draft of a piece titled "The Illusion of Power," written under Samira's challenge. He'd never been proud of anything academic before. Maybe, just maybe, his father would be proud too. But when he reached the office, Richard Hale was already there, standing by the window in a sharp gray suit, checking his phone like it owed him money. "You're late," Richard muttered without looking up. "Let's get this over with." The school counselor, clearly nervous, handed over Mark's new report. Mark reached for it, but Richard took it first. He scanned it. The grades were better, still far from perfect, but showing steady improvement. Teacher remarks read, shows initiative. Participating actively. Significant change in attitude. Richard closed the folder with a dull snap. "This is what you call progress?" Mark exhaled. "I'm trying." "Honestly trying with who?" Richard pressed. "The last tutor quit. Who's been helping you?" Mark paused. He didn't want to drag Samira into this, but something in him said it was time. "Samira." "The janitor." Silence. Richard blinked, then gave a dry, sharp laugh. "You're kidding. She used to be a professor." "She's a janitor," Richard cut in, his tone dripping with disdain. "And wearing a scarf on her head doesn't make her any more qualified. That's all that matters." Mark's voice rose. "She's taught me more than any of your overpriced tutors. She taught me to think." Richard stepped forward, voice low and threatening. "You're embarrassing this family. You're wasting time with people who have nothing to offer. She's using you." Mark didn't flinch. "No. She sees me. You never did." Richard stared at him like he was looking at a stranger. "If you keep going down this road, you lose everything. No car, no money, no name. Don't test me." Mark felt the words burn his tongue, but he said them anyway. "Maybe I need to lose everything to figure out who I actually am." Richard didn't answer. He just walked away. The next week, Mark was quieter, angrier, but not defeated. The kids at school noticed. The teachers did too. Rumors spread. Some said Mark was obsessed with the janitor. Others mocked him openly. Kyle, the football star, shared a video of Mark sitting with Samira after hours, captioned, "Lessons from the lady in the scarf." Mark didn't flinch. Instead, he printed his essay and pinned it to the school's public reading board under the title, "Learning doesn't make me weak. Ignorance does." Mark Hale. The paper was gone the next day, but the message, it had already taken root. Monday morning brought a strange calm. The rain had stopped. The sky was gray but still. Mark walked into school early, clutching a coffee in one hand and his notebook in the other. He found Samira in the back hallway, mopping near the old science wing. She looked up as he approached, one eyebrow raised. "You're bringing peace offerings now?" "Coffee," Mark replied, handing her one. "And something else." Samira took the cup and studied him closely. "You've got that look. The one people get right before they say something that changes everything." Mark sat on the floor, the notebook still in his hands. "I looked you up online." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You what?" "Not in a creepy way," he added quickly. I just wanted to know. You quoted Socrates. You teach like you've got 20 years of experience. And I found an old article, Samira Khan, tenured professor at Boston University. Guest speaker, published writer, award winner. She closed her eyes for a long moment. That woman existed. She just doesn't get invited back anymore. What happened? Samira leaned against her mop handle. I blew the whistle on a plagiarism scandal involving a tenured dean. Big name. Powerful. I refused hush money. They shut me out quietly, permanently. The people I trusted disappeared, and then my husband was killed in a car accident, on his way to a conference I organized. Mark swallowed hard. I lost everything, she said softly. Except my mind. And your voice, he said quietly. She gave a faint nod. Then I want to make you a deal, Mark said. Samira raised an eyebrow. What kind of deal? I want you to teach me. Really teach me, like I'm one of your college students. Don't hold back. Don't treat me like I'm fragile. I want to learn everything you know. I want to be someone, not because of my last name, but because of what I can do. She studied him. Something had shifted in his eyes. No defiance, no arrogance. And you're part of the deal? She asked. I won't quit, no matter how hard it gets. I'll fail, rewrite, relearn, whatever it takes. Samira stayed silent for a moment, then extended her hand. Then we've got a deal. They shook on it. No contracts, no signatures, just truth. That week, things intensified. Samira built a plan, not one based on tests, but on understanding. Mark read Baldwin, Hughes, Morrison. He started writing reflections instead of essays. He questioned systems, injustice, himself. Each night, he handed her a notebook filled with thoughts. And each night, she returned it with questions that dug even deeper. The school still didn't know. To the rest of them, Mark was just figuring things out. But inside, something bigger was happening. A few days later, Mark showed up to evening study with someone new. This is Priya, he said. She's in my biology class. She needs help with writing. Samira smiled. Looks like we've got ourselves a class. More students came, quietly, cautiously. Word spread that someone at the school was actually helping. Not grading, not judging, just teaching. The abandoned library turned into their secret classroom. They read, wrote, debated, cried. It was beautiful and dangerous. One afternoon, Samira was called into the office. The assistant principal spoke in a stiff, corporate tone. Ms. Khan, we've received concerns. Parents are asking why their children are spending time with janitorial staff after hours. And well, some have expressed discomfort about the religious aspect. Samira's eyes narrowed slightly. I'm teaching, she said simply. You're not a certified instructor here. It's not in your job description. Samira held her gaze. Neither is saving a kid's life. But I've done that anyway. The assistant principal didn't respond, but Samira knew what was coming. Mark heard about it the next day. They told you to stop? Yes. That's insane. You're helping. I know, she interrupted softly. But that's what systems do. They don't attack what's broken. They attack what's working. Especially when it's not the kind of person they want it to come from. Mark clenched his fists. I'm going to tell my dad. I'll go to the board. I'll go public. Not yet, Samira said firmly. Your voice needs to be strong enough to stand on its own first. Not your father's name, yours. Mark nodded, and he understood. The revolution had already begun. Winter crept into Boston, painting the mornings in fog and silence. The school hallways were darker, quieter. But inside Mark, something brighter was growing. A kind of light he couldn't explain. One morning, Samira met him in the old library, the one no one used anymore. She sat him down, folded her hands over a book, and looked him in the eyes. It's time I tell you the one thing no one teaches. Mark leaned forward. I'm listening. The secret isn't in grades or textbooks or diplomas, Samira said quietly. The secret to real learning is transformation. She stood, pacing slowly across the dusty library floor. Most people learn to pass, to survive, to repeat what someone told them and hope it's enough. But you don't change like that. You change when something inside you breaks, then rebuilds stronger. Mark stayed silent. You've started that process, she continued, but you need to know what real learning feels like. It's messy. It's painful. It's personal. But it's real. She reached into her bag and handed him a worn book with a deep blue binding. This saved me, she said. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I read it when I lost everything. It brought me back. Mark opened the cover. Handwritten notes filled the margins, underlined passages bleeding into tiny sketches in the corners. You're giving me this? I'm trusting you with it. Why me? Samira sat back down. Because when I saw you that day, you weren't just arrogant, you were drowning. And something in you still wanted to live. Mark clutched the book. I'm going to read every word. And then write something real. Not for me. For you, she finished softly. Samira stood, picking up her mop and bucket. Before leaving, she turned back. Next time someone asks how you're doing in school, don't say I'm improving. Say, I'm becoming someone. He sat there long after she left, the book heavy in his hands. But his chest was heavier still, not with fear, but with meaning. He didn't want to just pass anymore. He wanted to matter. Something had shifted. You could see it in the way Mark walked. He no longer moved through the school like a prince, but like someone awake. Same clothes, same face, but the weight behind his eyes was different now. Focused. Most teachers didn't know what to make of it. The arrogant air was gone, replaced by a student asking real questions, writing full essays, volunteering for group work. One day during history class, he raised his hand. Can we talk about how the textbook glosses over colonial violence like it was a footnote? The room went silent. Even the teacher hesitated. Where'd you hear that? He asked cautiously. Coelho, Baldwin, and a woman who knows how to teach. No one knew how to respond. But no one forgot that moment either. Mark wasn't just changing himself. He was starting to see others, the quiet girl who always ate lunch alone, the student who worked 2 jobs after school and still showed up on time, the teacher who gave brilliant lessons but never got the respect she deserved. And he noticed something else. Once you learn to really see people, you start to realize how many go unseen. Each day with Samira continued like clockwork. Mornings of deep questions, evenings of writing. He was building something, not just better grades, but a better self. The essays became more personal, more political, more powerful. Samira corrected them with tough love, red ink, sharp notes. Don't just say it, mean it. This sentence is pretty but hollow. Rewrite it with your soul. Mark rewrote over and over. He stopped caring about what people thought, not out of arrogance, but because he finally knew who he was becoming. One afternoon, Mark brought another classmate to their study session. Then another. And another. Soon, the abandoned library became a quiet revolution. Samira taught circles of 5, 6, sometimes 10 students after hours. They weren't just learning to write. They were learning to think. Books once ignored became sacred. Quotes were passed around like battle cries. If you are silent about your pain, Samira told them one evening, they will erase it, and you like you never existed. And in that moment, Mark knew he'd never be silent again. Azora Neale Hurston. The function of freedom is to free someone else. Toni Morrison. These weren't just study sessions. They were awakenings. But not everyone was pleased. One rainy afternoon, Samira was pulled into the office. The assistant principal spoke in a careful, clipped tone. Ms. Khan, we've had complaints. Parents are asking why their children are meeting with janitorial staff after hours. Some have raised concerns about cultural influence. I'm teaching, Samira replied simply. That's not your role. Maybe it should be, she said, her voice steady. Ms. Khan, we're going to have to ask you to stop. She left the office without another word, but her back was straighter than ever. The next morning, Mark found out. They're shutting you down. They're scared, Samira said. Of what? Of someone with no official power teaching students how to have real power. I'll speak out. I'll go public. Call my dad. No, she placed her hand gently on his shoulder. Not yet. Your voice needs to stand on its own. Not your father's name, yours. Mark nodded, teeth clenched. But something inside him knew. The storm was close. The change they'd sparked couldn't stay hidden forever. It happened faster than he expected. Mark walked into the garage after school, drenched from the rain, gripping a paper with a bold red A on it, the first he'd earned all year. The essay was titled The Courage to Unlearn. His teacher's comment, you found your voice. He wanted to show his father, not for approval, but for truth. He found Richard standing beside a brand new electric sports car, talking over Bluetooth about acquisitions. "Dad," Mark said, holding the paper. "I want to show you something." Richard took it with a blank face, scanned the title, raised an eyebrow. "Is this a joke?" "It's a real essay from my English class. I got an A." "Mark, this is a diary entry about feelings. This isn't academic. It's sentimental. It's about growth. About learning." Richard tossed the paper onto the passenger seat. "Who taught you to write like this?" Mark hesitated, then said it clearly. "Samira. The janitor." Silence. Richard stepped forward, his voice low and full of venom. "You're telling me you're learning from someone who mops floors? A woman in a headscarf. She was a professor before. She's a failure now." Mark's fists clenched. "She's done more for me than you ever have. If you don't stop seeing her, you lose everything," Richard warned. "Your money, your car, your name." "Then maybe I need to lose it all," Mark said, trembling, "to figure out who I really am." Richard stared at him coldly. "Pack your things. You're done." The next day, Samira was gone. Fired early. No warning. Escorted to the gate. No chance to say goodbye. Mark searched the halls. Empty. Her bucket, her coat gone. He felt like he couldn't breathe. His grades started slipping again, not because he didn't know the material, but because his fire was gone. He walked like a ghost. The library was silent now. Then came the final blow, a bulletin board announcement. Senior speech contest. Topic: what it means to win in life. Open to families and the community. It was the last big assignment of the year. Scholarships, university recommendations, public recognition on the line. For most students, it was just another hoop to jump through. For Mark, it was something else. It was war. That same morning, he confirmed what he already suspected. Samira had been fired quietly, due to budget cuts. Everyone knew better. She was gone without fanfare. Mark sat in the empty cafeteria, notebook open, hands shaking. He stared at the pages filled with her words, her corrections, her questions. Learning is transformation. Pride is a trap disguised as protection. You don't need permission to become someone new. He closed the notebook and opened a new one. At the top of the first page, he wrote, "Not for grades. Not for applause. For truth." The night of the speech contest arrived. The auditorium was packed. Parents in expensive coats. Students in neatly pressed suits. College scouts in the back row with clipboards. Mark stood behind the curtain in a plain navy shirt and dark jeans. No flashy shoes. No last name pinned to his chest. Just him and his story. His name was called. He stepped onto the stage. The room fell silent. He looked across the crowd and began. "My name is Mark Hale. Some of you know me as the kid who wasted a golden ticket, who didn't care, who failed. They say I had everything, but I didn't have the one thing that mattered, someone who believed in me. Until she showed up." He paused. "She wasn't my teacher. Not officially. She wasn't paid to help me. She had no office, no authority, just a mop, a headscarf, and a heart big enough to see through my anger." He scanned the audience. "She taught me how to read between the lines, in books and in life. She taught me how to write, how to think, how to listen. She didn't just clean the floors of this school. She cleared the fog in my head. The air shifted. People leaned forward. But she was fired. Silenced. Because systems don't like it when someone from the bottom, someone they've already decided to overlook, starts making a real difference. Especially when she doesn't look like the kind of person they want standing at the front of the class." His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "So today, I'm not speaking to impress you. I'm speaking to honor her." He held up a notebook. "She told me learning was transformation. That real winning isn't about being rich or powerful. It's about becoming someone worth remembering." His voice softened. "She might not be here right now, but she's in every word I'm saying. So, what does it mean to win in life? It means waking up, letting go of your name, finding your truth, and using it to lift others." Silence. Then one clap. Another. And then the room erupted, applause, a standing ovation, even tears. Some of the faculty were crying. And from the back of the room, a woman in a neatly pinned headscarf, with quiet, steady eyes, wiped a tear and smiled. "Samira." She had come back quietly, just to see him shine. And Mark, he wasn't a Hale that night. He was his own name. The video of his speech spread fast. First through students, then alumni, then the press. Billionaire's son credits Muslim Janitor for saving his life. That headline traveled further than any Hale Corporation deal ever had. Samira was invited to speak at a local college. Then another. Then a teaching position. Doors reopened. Not because of a resume, but because of a truth that couldn't be ignored anymore. Mark passed every class. Not with pity, but with purpose. He declined Ivy League offers and chose a small college focused on social justice and education. When asked why, he said, "Because I want to teach the way she taught me, and build the kind of place where no one has to ask to be seen." The sun was high over Boston the day Mark knocked on a modest front porch holding an envelope. Samira opened the door, wearing a simple cardigan and a look of quiet surprise. "You didn't have to come all the way out here," she said. "I did," Mark replied, handing her the envelope. Inside, his high school diploma, his college acceptance, and something else. A handwritten proposal. "I want to start something," he said. "A center," Mark said, his voice steady. "A place where people can learn the way I did, honestly, deeply, without shame. I want to call it the Samira Institute." Samira read the letter in silence, then looked up, tears shining in her eyes. "Why me?" "Because everything I am now started with you. Only if we do it together," she whispered. "Always." Months later, the Samira Institute opened its doors in a repurposed community center in the heart of the city. Classes, mentorship, late-night writing circles. Kids who had been written off finally had a second chance. Samira taught again, this time with chalk, with books, with freedom. Mark ran the center's programs, but never stopped learning. And the city took notice. Awards came. Articles followed. But the real reward came one quiet afternoon when a 12-year-old student, shy, struggling, handed Samira a notebook and said, "This place made me feel smart for the first time." She cried that day. So did Mark. As for Richard, he came quietly to the Institute's opening. He stood in the back, watching his son speak about justice, humility, and healing. After the event, they met outside. "I didn't expect to cry," Richard admitted. "I didn't expect to forgive you," Mark said. They hugged, not as father and heir, but as two men trying. Years passed. The Institute grew. One evening, Mark took the stage again, this time to accept a National Education Award. He held the microphone, paused, and said, "They said I failed everything, until I learned one thing that changed my life, that greatness doesn't come from being seen. It comes from seeing others. And sometimes, the person who teaches you the most isn't in a suit. They're wearing work shoes. They're holding a mop, quoting philosophers while no one's listening." Her name is Samira Khan, and she didn't just save my grades. She saved my soul.